We're looking at Ayer's article, Freedom and Necessity. Then we don't have any meeting on Wednesday. Then we don't have any meeting on Friday. And on Monday, we'll look at Dennett's article, True Believers. So I want to start out with, there's a problem about free will and determinism that everybody knows. And I just want to start out by laying out this. There's a view that free will is compatible with our living in a deterministic universe. So deterministic meaning, if you've got a description of the way the world was at the Big Bang, you've got a description of all the particles and where they all are and what kind of condition they're all in at the time of the Big Bang. And then you've got a set of laws, a set of physical generalizations governing the universe, and then you look at what happens between the Big Bang and now. You could just predict the whole thing. You can just read off from the way the universe initially was, plus all the general laws governing the universe, what's going on right now. That's determinism. That's all right? The relentless laws of nature governing the relentless unfolding of the atoms determines everything else that happens. Sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, but we're not getting any audio.
Oh, I'm sorry, there wasn't any audio because we were doing student evaluation. Sorry, I should have warned you. But now there is audio.
Okay, got it.
Right. Okay, I hope it's coming through. Thank you. Right. Okay. It was bound to happen. So the basic question is free will compatible with us living in a world like that? Incompatibilism says free will isn't compatible with our living in the deterministic universe. If the particles and the unfolding of the laws, the dynamics of the particles are unfolding in accordance with the laws, if that forces everything to happen, then how can you have any choice? How can you be free? Therefore, either freedom or determinism has to go. Incompatibilism says you can't have them both. You can't have freedom and determinism. I'm just curious. Most people have thought about that. I would guess that many of you anyway will have thought about this at some point. What's your hunch? Can you put your hand up if your feeling is free will is compatible with living in the deterministic universe? Okay, and if you think, no, free will is not compatible with living in the deterministic universe. Okay, so the compatibilists are winning on numbers. And if you don't understand the question, if the question's clear enough but you're not sure which way you go on it, how many more options are there? Tell me if there's some other option I haven't covered. Okay, so at the moment, compatibilists have it. There is a problem if you're an incompatibilist, which is, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, which are you going to say goes, freedom or determinism? You might say, well, after all, maybe the universe isn't governed by rigorous laws. Maybe there are things that just happen and no laws to explain them. So if you said, well, we don't live in a law-governed universe, we're indeterminate, that's how there can be free will, then that makes free action just random action. Action that's not explained by anything. It just happened that way. That's a kind of strange conception of freedom. The other thing you might do is keep determinism and let go of free will. Say, okay, the universe does unfold according to its relentless laws, but so we don't act freely. And then that really would be the end of civilization. Nobody can be praised or blamed for anything. Everyone is just an automaton governed by these laws. There are some philosophers who've thought it, yes, it's the end of civilization, and that would be a good thing. Here's Nietzsche. Whoa. The desire for freedom of the will. He's talking about, he's talking about you and me here. The desire for freedom of the will in the superlative metaphysical sense, such as still holds sway, unfortunately, in the minds of the half-educated. The desire to bear the entire and ultimate responsibility for one's actions oneself. You say, I made that happen. I did it. To absolve God, the world, ancestors, chance and society therefrom. That feeling that it's me that's doing it, not any of that other stuff. All that stuff that happened in the past, that's just history. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do right now. Nothing made me do it. That involves nothing less than to be precisely this causa sui, this self-caused thing, and with more than Munchausen daring, being just as big a fantasist as you like, pull yourself up into existence by the hair, out of the slough of nothingness. That's got to go. Okay. Well, the great thing about Ayer's article in the Target article for today is that he lays out the basic ideas here. He's got all the basic ideas here. It seems to me that, given the point we're at, you guys should be able to critique his argument extremely effectively. When you look at his argument, it seems that he has all the important pieces there, but none of them are in the right place, and some of them are upside down. So let's just go through it. He's arguing against you guys who believe that, he starts out arguing against you guys who believe that you can have both free will and determinism. When I do something of my own free will, then I could have acted otherwise. But if human behavior is entirely governed by causal laws, it's not clear how any action that is done could have been avoided. And the idea is, remember, possible worlds? Possible worlds? There's you see our old friend, the actual world that we live in, with the A on it, and there are all these other possible worlds, all these other ways things could have been. So, as you can see, first of all, there are a lot of possible worlds, and secondly, some of them are closer to the actual world than others. So when you say, I could have acted otherwise, I picked up the chalk, I didn't need to pick up the chalk, I could have done something else, I was free. That's to say, there's another possible world, somewhere really close, where I didn't pick up the chalk. It could easily have happened that I did something else. That's what you're saying. You're saying you're free. I could easily have done something else. Something like that. But if the world is determined, then right from the Big Bang, given the physics of the universe, it was physically determined that I was going to pick up the chalk. How then did I have any choice in the matter? There isn't a nearby possible world in which I didn't pick up the chalk, because the initial condition of the universe and all these laws just made it happen. I didn't have any control over any of that stuff. So the problem is, it feels like if I'm deciding what to do right now, if I'm deciding pick up the chalk with this hand, pick it up with this hand, there are all these possibilities open to me. You're deciding what schools to apply to. You're deciding what course to take. It feels like there are all these possibilities open to you. You are just choosing one out of all those. But in fact, there's only one option that realistically you are ever going to take. And someone who knew all the facts about the physics of the universe and about the laws could have predicted 100 years ago what you were going to do right now. So you didn't actually have that choice. Ayer says, you might argue, is it really true that every event has a cause? You might say, well, we don't actually know laws that govern everything. But maybe that's because there aren't comprehensive laws to be found. You get this with computers the whole time. Everybody knows this. You do one thing with a computer, right? You're trying to get the computer to do one thing, and it's just not working. And then you switch it off, and you switch it on again, and now it works. And you say, well, what happened there? And most people, I mean, there's a whole generation of children growing up as indeterminists, because everyone has now got the idea that with computers, just stuff happens, right? Are you really going to try and figure out why it works now and it didn't work earlier? You just say, stuff happens. Maybe there are laws down there governing it. Maybe computers are deterministic, but maybe they aren't. Maybe it was just the workings of random chance. I have no idea. Yeah. So maybe free actions couldn't be causally predicted. Maybe determinism is not true. Maybe free actions can't be predicted just because they're free. When you're choosing what to do with your life, it's really up to you, and that can't be predicted because it's a choice, because it's a free choice. But that makes it seem like when you're deciding what to do on something of any importance, it's a matter of pure chance that you act in one way rather than another. It's not governed by laws. It's just like the random firing of a radioactive molecule. If it's a matter of pure chance, though, that you act one way rather than another, maybe that's freedom, but you can't be held to blame for it. It's not determined. But is that really all freedom is? Ayer says, indeed, when a man's actions seem to us quite unpredictable, when, as we say, there is no knowing what he will do, we do not look upon him as a moral agent. We look upon him as a lunatic. And that's right? I mean, if you can't explain what someone's going to do, if you can't explain someone's actions, that's what a crazy person is. There's no getting any understanding of what they're doing. But you can only explain what's happened insofar as you're deterministic about it. So either it's random chance or it's determined. If it's random chance, it's just a crazy action. If it's explainable, then it's not crazy, but it is determined. So how can you be a compatibilist? How can you have both free will and determinism? You can't have both free will and determinism. You might say, well, look, what's happening is my choice is causing my action. So long as my choice is causing my action, that's free. But then the question is, what's causing your choice? Is all this stuff about your background and your parents and all that stuff, where is that coming from? Is your choice just random? When you're deciding what course to take, what school to go to, what to do, is that just random? That's not freedom. If it's just like the action of a crazy person, choosing one thing rather than another. Or is it your character that's responsible for it? Well, what determines your character? What you've got is a past character causing a present character, causing a choice. But where is the freedom in that? You don't have the option to go one way rather than another, because everything in your background is making this happen. Ayer says some people talk about freedom as consciousness of necessity. That's like you just kind of bow to the facts. You say, okay, I accept that everything I do is causally determined. I accept that it's not really up to me. But what freedom is when I realize that that is what's going on. That's consciousness of necessity. But that's not really freedom. That's just realizing that you're not free and accepting that you're just going to live with that. Is that what you guys who are compatibilists think? Yeah, realize everything's determined. But well, there you go. That's what I call freedom. Being made to do stuff. That's true freedom. Hello? Okay. Ayer's got a positive proposal. He says everything to this point is right. It can't be just consciousness of necessity. But it's not causality that freedom's to be contrasted with. Maybe your background and so on are making all this stuff happen. But the question is, are you constrained? It's the kind of causation that's important. If someone else is making you do that stuff, then you're not free. But if it's not a constraint that's making you do it, then you are free. So from the fact that my action is not causally determined, it doesn't necessarily follow that I'm constrained to do it. And this is equivalent to saying it does not necessarily follow that I'm not free. Actually, wait a minute. When I say not causally determined, what I mean is causally determined. Okay? So I hope that's what Ayer says, because it doesn't make an ounce of sense otherwise. Okay. So from the fact that my action is causally determined, it does not necessarily follow that I'm constrained to do it. Because a constraint is just one kind of causation. And if you're not constrained, then you're free. What do you think of that? We've actually come across this kind of view before. Does that seem plausible? This is the picture Ayer gives you. So far I've just walked through the whole of Ayer's article. You should be able to read Ayer's article without any grief at all at this point. Any comments on that? Put your hand up if that sounds right. And if it sounds wrong? 1 for and 1 against? 2 against? And if you don't really know what he's saying? Can you put your hand up if you don't really see what this is saying? And if you do see what this is saying? Okay, and if you're feeling kind of shy? Right. Okay. Look, what he's saying here, I think, anyway, this is how I read it, is what's going on here with the determinism is, this is saying there's a whole bunch of causes dating right back to the start of the universe that are making you do stuff. Everything you do, you are caused to do by a whole bunch of background factors. That's determinism. Some of these background factors are called constraints. Some of these background factors involve people binding and gagging you, making you do stuff. So some of the causes are constraints. Some of them are not constraints. Some of them are things like just having had a good lunch, which will affect your behavior, but it doesn't make you not free. So that's not a constraint. Like that's lunch, for example. Right? And what he's saying is, if what's making you do it is a bunch of causes that are not constraints, then you're free. But that's consistent with it being determined. Yep. Thoughts are determined. Yeah, your thoughts will be determined too. Yeah. Absolutely everything. Yeah. Because after all, your thoughts depend on what's going on in your brain. And what's going on in your brain is determined, presumably. Yeah. Yep. Isn't the causal law a constraint? Yeah, he's saying no, some causal laws, the operation of some causal laws would be constraints, but not all of them are. Every kind of causal law is a constraint. Yeah. If it's a causal law that you're going to die, so you're constrained, yeah, you can struggle against it as you wish. Yeah. Is that the point? Yeah. So in that sense, the causal law does constrain you. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. You can't not die just by choosing not to die. The causal laws constrain you.
Yeah, but you can't choose.
You speak from an enviable position. No, I know what you mean, yeah. There are lots of things you can't choose, yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's not the picture Ayer has in mind. He's not taking it that all causal factors are constraints. Yeah. Sorry? It's like an assumption, yeah. You see, when we divide things, the way we talk about constraints is, it is as if the causal laws are binding and gagging us, and we use that kind of imagery. But that's just a mistake. That's pushing it too far. Yep. They can come in degrees. Yeah. Yes. That's right. But when you look at the whole package of causal factors affecting you, that will completely determine what you do. That's the idea. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that happens the whole time. Yeah, one sibling is rebellious, the other sibling does what they're told. Yeah. Oh, what is a constraint? Yes, that's very good, isn't it? Yeah. You're right. There has to be something here about choice and where the choice comes from, right? And Ayer doesn't really go into that, but it would have to be that if I choose, then I can do it. Yeah, something like that. That's what you want, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. It is very similar to Huxley's frog. Can we what? Here is Huxley's frog. Right. Not for the first time you completely anticipate. I mean, of course, I was reading your brain impulses. I knew what you were going to say. But it is exactly like Huxley's frog. This is what Huxley said about the frog. The frog, well, I mean, this is the unfortunate frog with its brain chopped up, remember? Poor little thing. It walks, hops, swims, goes through its gymnastic performances quite as well without consciousness and consequently without volition. But Huxley said the frog is free because there are no constraints on it. Nobody's making it do stuff it doesn't want to do. That's what freedom is. It's actually a picture of freedom very like Ayer's. But if Ayer's right, that's all the freedom we have. The sense that you can make a list of things like, you can make a checklist of what's a constraint and what isn't. Did somebody bind and gag you? Did somebody stand over you and make you do it? Did they offer you a lot of money? Did they threaten to kill your sister? And so on. Those are constraints. You go through the checklist of constraints. None of that stuff was there. But that last commenter is right, it seems to me, that if that's all there is to it, then you've just got a pretty arbitrary distinction between being made to do it by one set of factors and being made to do it by another set of factors. Yeah? That's not freedom. I want to do whatever I like. That doesn't tell me I can do whatever I like. I mean, if I want to do something different, then I can do something different. So how are you going to get freedom here? There's another problem with this. Frankfurt had this thing about wantons. He said, I'll use the term wanton to refer to agents who first order desires, but who are not persons because they don't care about what their desires are. You have lots of desires. Some of them you think are good desires. Some of them you think are bad desires. Some of them you get behind. Some of them you try to curb. This is what you're doing, this kind of stuff, right? You're trying to steer your desires. And Ayer's thing doesn't have any room for that. You've just got your desires. You're overwhelmed by your desires. You're made to have these desires by your background. Then your desires make you do stuff. That's all that's going on. How is that freedom? What you want to do to be free is to be able to stand back and reflect on the process. Isn't that right? That's what it would take to be free. Not that you just are driven along, but if you could reflect and decide which reasons were going to make you act. Like you might think, well, my parents wanted me to do it. That's why I'm going to do it. but then stand back and think, but do I want to be motivated by that reason? You might think, if I do this, I'll get a lot of money. That's good enough for me. What more do you want to know? That will drive me to it. Freedom is when you can stand back and say, do I want to do it for that reason? So it's not just that you have the reason, and that's like a vector making you act. You want to be able to reflect, this is my reason, and do I want that to be the reason for which I act? If you have the power to cut that causal connection between the reason and your action, you say, I'm going to do it, but not because of the money, or I'm going to do it, but not because it's what my parents wanted. That's freedom. When you can stand back and disconnect the reason from the action. Yeah? So that's quite different to just having been pushed about by a whole bunch of causes. Some of them count as constraints and some of them not. This is a matter of you being able to know what it is that's causing you to act. And for each of those causes in your action, reflect and say, do I want that to be what's affecting me? So that makes it seem like it's not quite what Frankfurt said, what desires you desire to have, but what reasons you choose to be influenced by. That's what matters for freedom. So that's much more than a frog has. The frog does a whole bunch of stuff because it's hungry, because it wants lunch, because of whatever. But it doesn't know about that. It doesn't know what is motivating it. That's what's different between you and me and the frog. We know what's motivating us, and we have a choice as to whether we let it motivate us. Not that you can necessarily stand back and reflect on all your motivations simultaneously, but for each one you can say, is my heart pure? Is that what I want to be driving me around? You can, in principle, do that. And we often do that. So, when Ayer was talking about this idea of freedom as consciousness of necessity, there is actually something important in that, which is the idea that you're conscious of the factors that are making you do stuff. So what matters is that you are aware of the considerations that could motivate you, so that you can make that decision as to whether they're going to motivate you, whether you're going to let that happen. Yes? It doesn't even matter.
Whether you think that you're making a decision based on like, you want me to become creating other people's
Yep.
So how would that work?
Okay, do you mean this, that your choosing and decisions are themselves causally determined?
Well, I mean, I know that you wouldn't like choose what you do, but if you choose like, why you do it,
Yeah.
isn't it still determined?
Yes, exactly. That's right. Your choosing itself would still be determined. Right. So I'm reflecting in my... So, first of all, I think there's something clearly right about the picture I just gave. Yeah, it's kind of recognizable, right? We all do that, yeah? That you think, is that a good reason? Is that really a good reason? This is why I'm doing it, but do I really want to do it for that reason? But then you're right. The background worry is all this reflection I'm doing, that itself is just being driven by the inexorable forces of history. Yep. So I'm just being pushed about at a higher level. Yep. That's the puzzle. Yeah. I think part of it here is it can be predictable that you're going to do something, but it still be completely free. I used to do this thing of I used to meet a friend of mine for lunch every week at the same restaurant, same menu every time. And every week, I would puzzle over the menu. It was quite a complicated menu, and I would go through the whole lot, and then I would eventually choose exactly the same thing every week. And there was a waiter there who was the same waiter every week, kind of watching me, and just waiting while I went through all this before giving him the same order as I had every week for the last few months. What people do can be completely predictable, but still be free. Yeah, I had the choice to say, I'm choosing this because of the bacon. But do I want the bacon to be affecting me? No. But still, okay, so I do all that. But it's all completely determined, completely predictable. But the puzzling thing is, that still seems to be free. You still seem to have had a choice there. There's a real background puzzle here about determinism, and I think it has to do with this picture about what's going on with what could easily happen, what you could easily have done otherwise. The way the determinist paints it is that if the laws of history are making you do it, then you couldn't easily have done anything else. So, let me just check. Is that picture of some possible worlds being closer than others? Does that make sense? Some things could easily happen. Some things couldn't easily happen. Yeah. The basic point here is, I think this is almost a kind of technical point, but it's really important for how you think about determinism. The basic point here is that something could be causally determined, but it still could easily have happened that something else was the case. Something can be causally determined, but it could easily have gone otherwise. Let me give you a simple example. Suppose I'm... This has got nothing to do with free will, this example. It just has to do with what could easily have happened. Suppose that I'm cycling into campus, and as I'm cycling into campus, you sweep past me in your Cadillac, as you do, nearly knocking me off my bike, and I'm kind of indignant, and I catch you afterwards. I say, hey, you nearly knocked me off my bike, and you say, don't be so... Let's suppose it's not you, but someone else. This person says, don't be so nervous, you jellyfish. I was yards away from you. I was nowhere near knocking you off your bike. Well, what we're arguing about there, and this could be I could sue you. Just watch out. What we're arguing about there is how close the possible world is in which you do knock me off my bike. You see what I mean? I'm saying the possible world in which I was a goner is the world right next door to this one. And you're saying, well, of course it's kind of logically possible that I could have knocked you off your bike, but everything would have had to be very different for that to happen. And people really do. I mean, this is something that comes up in real life the whole time. I mean, people say you were negligent, you didn't look after safety. When people say a nuclear reactor or a hospital was being run dangerously, what they mean is the world in which you had an outbreak of some disease at this hospital, that was really close. And if the people at the hospital say, no, it was perfectly safe, what they're saying is it couldn't easily have happened that we had an epidemic here. Or with a nuclear reactor, if you say it's completely safe, of course it is logically possible that it could blow up, but the world in which it blows up is very far away. So the point here is, it might be completely causally determined that you didn't knock me off my bike. I mean, if I'm taking you to court and saying, hey, look at the way you were driving, then you could defend yourself. You could say, look, I believe in physics. Physics tells us that right from the Big Bang to the present day, there were the particles unfolding, governed by the relentless laws of physics, that made it completely inevitable that I would miss you. I was only a millimeter away, but it was determined that I was going to miss you. The point is, it's just a confusion to think that if something's determined, that means it couldn't easily have been otherwise. Anytime you feel regret, when you think, boy, I wish I'd done this, I wish I'd taken astrophysics, then what you're thinking is, there's a nearby world in which I took astrophysics, and boy, look at me there, am I having a good time? You see what I mean? Regret means the world in which it happened, in which the things went the other way, that's really close. And boy, am I having a good time in that one. But determinism doesn't show that you shouldn't feel regret. If someone says, well, it was physically determined that you're going to do what you did, well, that doesn't help. Or if you feel relief, that's because you're watching someone thinking, God, that might have been me taking that astrophysics class. Boy, am I glad I didn't take that. You see what I mean? So it might be causally determined that you didn't choose otherwise, but it could still be something that could easily have happened. So suppose I'm saying, I could have chosen not to take the money. The determinist is saying, you couldn't have chosen not to take the money because all the causes going back to the dawn of time guaranteed that you were always going to take the money. So it couldn't easily have happened that you didn't take the money. But that's not the right way to think of it. When you're thinking about this possible world, everything that's going on in this possible world could be causally determined, but it could still be that it easily happened that things were otherwise. That's the thing about knocking me off my bike. It might be causally determined from the beginning of time that you were going to miss me, but it could still easily have happened that you hit me. I mean, there is a puzzle about that, because any world in which I choose to do things differently, I choose not to do it this way, that's a world in which things had to be physically different just a little bit all the way back to the dawn of time. So in the face of it, if I was going to do things differently, if I was not going to take the money, then either the laws of nature had to be different or something physical had to be different about the universe all the way back to the Big Bang. So just by choosing not to take the money, I could have affected the whole history of the universe. Isn't that weird? If you knocked me off my bike, that would have had to have affected either the laws of nature or the way the physical world is all the way back to the Big Bang. How could it be so easy? I mean, how could it be so easy to affect history? Well, that is a real puzzle. That is a puzzle still. There must be an answer to it. The best puzzle, the most popular answer right now is from the philosopher David Lewis, who says, well, when you're considering what could easily have happened, what you're looking at is not suspending the laws of nature. If I'm saying you could easily have knocked me off my bike, what I'm saying is there could have been a small miracle in which all the physical particles just got shifted a little bit, and wham, there you go. I'm a goner. And it would just be a little miracle, just a tiny one. So it's a kind of calculus of miracles. So if I say I could have chosen differently, what I mean is there could have been this very small disturbance in the universe where something just came from outside and it happened completely differently. That's the way we talk. That's the way we think about freedom. I hope you find that satisfying, because that's all there is. Okay. Thank you, guys.